Joining us now is Paul Verdu of Wisconsin Brewing Company and Ken Shearer of MoveUkraine in the U.S. They're here to discuss a new collaboration beer initiative to support MoveUkraine, an organization working to rebuild parts of Ukraine destroyed by the Russian invasion. Thanks for being here, Paul and Ken.
Thank you. We look forward to sharing our story.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Paul, when you reached out to me, you really laid out how personal this mission is for you. So, can you share a little bit of the background of, why this is so important for you?
Yeah, I happened to get linked in to Ken via a friend who mentioned their Move Ukraine story. And when I heard about it, I reached out to him immediately and we connected. And the reason I did that is I'm the father of 3 children that we adopted years ago from the region, not from Ukraine, but 2 children from Belarus, one from Minsk and one from Borisov. They're 22 right now. And then our youngest child, who turns 19 today, we adopted from St. Petersburg, Russia. And as a human citizen, I'm interested in peace and democracy and freedom. And the invasion was really something that has obviously bothered me, like it has almost everybody. But then as the father of 3 children from that region, I'm a little bit more vested. And then the last sort of reason is there was a gentleman by the name of Serge Zevlever, who's Ukrainian, who in his lifetime helped thousands of orphaned children from that region find new homes across the world. And he was instrumental in our adoptions he was the translator of all of our documents. And to adopt from over there, we're talking about thousands of pages of documents. And he was the signatory and translator on almost everything that got sent over there. And so his name is sort of emblazoned into my mind. I've never met the man. In the early days of the war, he decided to stay in Ukraine to help. He was a US citizen and a Ukrainian citizen. He decided to stay in Ukraine. And sadly, about 2 weeks into the war, he was killed by a sniper in Kiev. And so there's just a lot of different elements to why I'm passionate about this project and why I reached out to Ken immediately and looked to kind of get this initiative up and going.
So let's talk about that initiative. Ken, do you want to kind of give us some details on what it's all about and how this came together?
Sure. John Schmorin and his wife, Tusha, along with Andy Kuzic, are the 3 founders. They were living in Ukraine when the war broke out and had been there for between 10 and 25 years. John was on the road on business and couldn't go home because of the attacks on Kyiv. And so he got involved as a volunteer first and then saw the greatest need a year ago in May, that at that point over 1 million homes had been destroyed. People had nowhere to live. So the charity was started in May of 2022. And our mission is to build and repurpose existing structures that have been damaged to make them not only habitable, but a place that people who have lost almost everything can call home. So maybe as simple as replacing windows and ceilings and heating, or as complex as almost a complete rebuild. We're now venturing into from ground zero all the way up on a piece of land that a municipality may have donated. But we try to make this not only a shelter, but a shelter that gives the people dignity, because we realize coming out of this war, the entire country is going to have to be rebuilt. The GDP has been absolutely shattered. And so we're trying to do things where we use local suppliers, use local contractors, to call them that, and we rebuild the community that way. We work very much in concert with the municipality leadership, whether it's the governor or the city mayor and council, so that really is a partnership and it's not just us coming in and doing things.
What are the difficulties of rebuilding during a wartime?
That's a really good question, Justin. One of the big questions we often get is, how do we know that if we rebuild this home, it won't just be destroyed next week?
Right.
So again, to put it in the context of the whole country, 95% of the war is happening on the eastern side near the Russian border and on the south side. If you remember the early stories of the steel mills, where in the south, that the Ukrainian defenders were hunkered down for. That's a good 100 to 150 kilometers away from where most of the homes that we're rebuilding. Most of the internally displaced people are migrating to the west and north. And so, though it's not completely air raid free, for the most part, you or I could go into that part of the country very safely. And what's happened is those communities have had a huge burden placed on them. Imagine being a town of 30,000 and one day you have 5,000 new internal refugees flooding in looking for a place to live and food and shelter and everything else. So the areas we rebuild are relatively safe. We've rebuilt kindergartens that had fallen in disrepair. We have rebuilt schools that had been fallen into disrepair. We've even found a large library area that we rebuilt and created partitions for rooms. So where we're building is pretty safe. But the challenge is managing supplies, managing contractors, finding good project managers, and frankly, funds. We could do 3 times as much as we're doing if we could raise the funds. So one of the challenges in the US especially, but of the Western world in general, is we tend as a population to have a short attention span. And so when something fades away as being not the item of the day on CNN or Fox or wherever, then people don't stay connected. But the need is greater than ever. We had a conversation with a fellow that we put into a home when his house had been completely destroyed. We found him originally sheltering in his chicken coop on his piece of land. So it's hard for us as Americans or Canadians to comprehend how bad it can be. Entire towns have been turned to rubble. Probably answered more than your question.
No, I mean, you're right. There's still life going on amid this wartime, and you're also right that the journalists have, or at least some of the anchors have all moved on to other things. They're no longer visiting on site or
right.
Doing the live reports that they were when things first happened. One of the things that I'm curious about is how this beer collaboration came together and how you got brought in, Paul.
Yeah, I think Ken can talk about the origin story. I got brought in, like I mentioned, a friend of mine who used to work with Ken reposted something he put out there about this Move Ukraine initiative in the craft beer space. Actually started with a brewery in Canada. And so I just sent him a cold email saying, how can I help? And then I've now gotten way involved, and to my pleasure and my honor. I'm hoping that we can create a big movement in the US craft business. And to that point about it being a bit of a short attention span, I mean, it was over a year ago that a lot of us actually took if you guys recall, the beer recipe. I think you wrote about it.
Mm-hmm.
The beer recipe from that brewery in Kiev.
Yep.
And we all made that beer and we raised money, and that was thousands of dollars. I figured a year later, the mission is a little bit different, but the location is the same and the struggles are probably even worse now. So let's revive this idea and try to help out however we can. And like I said, Ken can probably talk a little bit more about how it started at a brewery in Canada.
There is a brewery in Cambridge, Ontario, which is about an hour and 20 minutes, depending on traffic, west of Toronto. And Mike Rudin is one of 4 principals. The name of the brewery is Four Fathers Brewing Company. It's in an old mill town, Cambridge. Beautiful building. They have a sign above their building that says "Stand for something good." So that's a mantra that they've embraced as a company and as members of the team. But they were contacted by the cousin of one of our founders, Tusha, who lived in Ottawa. And back last summer, when we were first getting started, I was first getting started, they came up with a Ukrainian Dunkel dark beer, and they crafted the beer and sold it in their brewery and to their network in Canada. And they donated 50 cents a can for every can that was sold. And so over the course of 3 months, they raised about $13,000 or $14,000, which was huge for us at the point. And about 2 months later, I called Mike and said, what if we brought you down to Chicago, introduced you to some of the local craft brewers where I live, and we could broaden this impact? And he came back a few days later and said, we can do even better than that. And he started talking about the craft brewery initiatives that have happened since COVID, All Together, Black is Beautiful, and Brave Noise. And he said, what if we can connect with all these people and go broader? So that's how the initiative started. I met with the agency that was kind of behind the scenes on those three, who happened to be in Chicago. Matt Tanaka is the head of that agency. And I drove down to Chicago. He gave me the rundown of what they'd done, how they'd done it, strengths, weaknesses, what would he do differently. And so we started. We're still very much in the beginning phases. Our big challenge right now is recruiting brewery partners to participate. But we think if we can get a few, the very first batch has been brewed out of the Canadian operation. So I should have actually cans of MoveUkraine Pilsner in my hands in about a week. So we're excited to move forward. We think this can make a big impact, not only for the charity, but an awareness across the country in a broader way of what's going on and how people can personally help and contribute to the rebuilding of a country.
Certainly. And we know, like we mentioned, we saw a good handful of breweries participate in similar things earlier last year, but there's definitely, it's died down a bit since then. Let's get into the specifics of the beer and what you're asking. What are for breweries that want to participate, what do they need to do, and what beer do they need to make? What percentage of money needs to go to this charity? What are all the nitty-gritty details?
Sure. And Paul, please jump in to add color commentary. We've created a recipe. We have created a separate landing page on the MoveUkraine.org website for the beer campaign. When people log into MoveUkraine.org, they can click a button and go to the beer page landing site. On there, they just have to register to say they want to be involved. They'll have access to the recipe. They'll have access to the can design. And actually, Paul's helping with broadening the specs of various options for packaging. We are creating with an agency out of Denver a whole social media campaign that each brewery can adapt to their own scenario. So it's almost like, here's 10 different sequenced sub campaigns. You can take this, download it, adapt it with your logo, adapt it to whatever your market audience is. We're trying to make this absolutely as simple as possible so that people can say there's no roadblock, I guess, or extra hurdle to get over. We don't mandate what people will do in terms of contribution levels. Our original folks have done between 25 and 50 cents per serving, whether that's a draft beer or a keg or.
Yeah, along those lines of keeping it as easy as possible and so that we can get maximum participation. Number one is there is a recipe, and it's special because it's the first time I talked to Kirby Nelson, our brewmaster. He's been making beer for 45 years. He's never used sunflower seeds in a beer. So they're on order as we speak, and they're coming in, and he's super excited. We happen to have a cereal cooker on our pilot system. He's going to actually cook them up a little bit and try to extract max flavor. So the reason it's got sunflower seeds is that's the national flower of Ukraine, and it's a very special meaning for the country. However, if a brewery doesn't want to do sunflower seed Pilsner, the goal here is participation. Do the same beer if you want. Do whatever beer you want. It doesn't matter. Sell it in a can. Sell it on draft in your tap room. Doesn't matter. Contribution level doesn't matter. Participation is what matters. And so while there is a bunch of things available and there's recipes and everything, the whole idea is to raise awareness and funds. So that's what makes it kind of broadly appealing. There's not a lot of guardrails. There's just some options for people to pursue.
Right. And then at the end of the day, that makes it more effective as kind of a
100%.
fundraiser too, because you can customize it for breweries know their own consumers. They know what they're looking for. And
Yeah, it wouldn't be a
cater to
good look
that.
if it's like, yeah, you want to participate but don't have sunflower seeds.
Right.
Okay, it's okay. I think it's
We're
kind of a
also-
cool idea. I'm really actually pretty excited about trying this beer. As a former baseball player, I have bought a lot of sunflower seeds in my life. So
We're actually also thinking about putting together a recipe for a seltzer to add to the mix so that people have a couple different options. Mike and his brewmaster in Canada have already tasted the beer. And this is a little bit of Canadian humor, but brewmaster is a very understated guy. But when he took the first taste before they started the canning process, he ran across the property to get Mike to come taste it. He was so excited about, the taste of the sunflowers was a little subtle, but he loved it. So we're excited to see that.
What's the turnaround time for Wisconsin Brewing's version of the beer?
I just talked to Kirby. It's going in next week into our pilot brewery. It's a Pilsner, so a month later or so it'll be ready to go. Well, we're, like I mentioned, I think we've talked before, we're the sponsor of a local baseball team as well. So that's where our pilot system is at the baseball park. So we'll do a special night with them. Already got them lined up to do that, a MoveUkraine kind of promotional night. And that's all we ask, is that any brewer who wants to get involved, just find an interesting, unique way to bring it to life and to support it. And this isn't really time bound for everyone else. Again, just like I talked about the beer, the timeline here is flexible. Just a continuous flow of this would be great. So keeping some, obviously these kind of things get a lot of interest up front, but we'll try to keep the momentum going, just keeping it top of mind for as long as we have to.
Sunflower seed beer at a baseball park. That's perfect.
Yeah.
And you've just begun recruitment on this, right?
That's correct.
We wanted to make sure that we had the website ready, some of the assets ready. I mean, the more ready we are, the better I think we'll have, the more success we'll have. And we're very close to going ready. Actually, by the time this airs, the website is already there. So we'll be by the time this airs, it's like, let's go. For sure.
Well, how can people, learn more and get involved in this? Just go to MoveUkraine.org.
That's correct. So they can see the broader background of the charity and the background information and what we're doing and projects. And then there's a link on that site taking you to the beer landing page that'll allow them to register and see the recipe and download the marketing campaigns. The marketing social media campaigns will be ready by the end of June. I looked at first drafts actually late last night. So we're excited about, different encapsulated social media that people can adapt.
And I think anyone can just reach out to me directly too if they have questions. paul.verdu@wbcll.com.
We won't ask you to give your cell phone number too.
They can also reach me at moveukraine.org.
Yeah, whoever wants to reach out, we'll help any way we can for sure. And a big thank you to you guys for taking an interest in this story and helping us pass it along. You guys have a broad reach and you have a lot of ideas coming your way. So to carve out time for us, we really, really appreciate it.
We're happy to do it. So thanks
Yeah.
to you and Ken for hopping on with us and chatting about it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Very excited.
And that's our show for this week. Thanks to Paul and Ken for joining us. Thanks to Zoe for hanging out. Thanks to our one-man audio team, Joe. And thanks to all of you for listening. We'll be back next week.